Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Healing the Spirit. I'm so excited that you're here. This is a transmission, a conversation between me and my dear friend Verena Borell on the Pluto in Aquarius transit that will be happening starting March 2023. So if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that Verena is a friend of the podcast. Verena was also my guest for episode 17 titled Mercury and the Outer Planets. So you may want to save that episode to listen to later if you resonate with Verena's perspective and voice, and also my, connection, my chemistry, my dance with Verena. Verena is a dear friend of mine. We met during Sabrina Monarch's Evolutionary Astrology Intensive. So Verena is very much dedicated to the practice, the lineage of evolutionary astrology. And as you know, I also have been studying evolutionary astrology for a while, although my practice is probably more rooted in Hellenistic astrology. But I think this conversation is a beautiful weaving of both our perspectives, and it's a very rich conversation. We talked about the archetypes of Pluto, we talked about Aquarius, and we also talk about what Pluto in Aquarius as a transit, and it's really a long transit because it will be happening for about 20 years. What kind of themes we might see coming up, what kind of challenges we might see coming up, and what might we learn from this transit together as a collective as well as individuals. So I'm really excited for you to get into this conversation, and without further ado, this is my conversation with Verena Borell. Oh, also, one final thing. If you are more of a visual person, the video version of this conversation is also available on Verena's YouTube channel. So feel free to go check out the links below in the show notes if you would like to experience us visually instead. It's essentially the exact same conversation. It was a great conversation. I didn't edit any of it really, except for audio enhancement purposes. And so you are free to check out to feel into whether you want to check out the audio or the video version. All right. For real, this is my conversation with Verena Borell on the Pluto in Aquarius transit.
Jonathan, I'm so happy that we are here.
Yes, thank you, Verena. Thank you for the invitation. This is super exciting. I always love being in any spaces with you, but especially when we're talking about astrology. I think there's always something really special that unfolds. So thank you for this invitation. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic with you.
I'm super excited. And I think that, it's a double invitation in a way, because this conversation, is published on my YouTube channel. So when you are watching it, welcome to my YouTube channel. And it's at the same time also published on your wonderful podcast, Jonathan. So if you listen to the audio version and want to see us, hop onto my YouTube channel. And if you want to have the refined version of this conversation, go to Jonathan's podcast, because Jonathan is Virgo ascendant editing the whole conversation, and I am not. I'm just Gemini ascendant roughness in your face. So
I love it. I love it. I doubt that I will ever need to like edit the actual conversation itself, but yeah, I probably, my Virgo ascendant can't help but clear up the audio, make little adjustments here and there. So yes.
Jonathan, I would say maybe would you be so kind to say just one sentence about you for my audience, and then I can do the same for your audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that invitation. My name is Jonathan Ko. I am an astrologer. I'm an intuitive. I also work with the Akashic Records. I work with the tarot. I work with a lot of different modalities. And yeah, I'm excited to do this with you, Verena. I guess another thing that I should mention is I am currently living in Brooklyn, New York. And Verena and I met in Sabrina Monarch's class. So, yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Verena?
We met and found each other. Yes. I'm so happy that we are together here and that we are together in these learning spaces since some time. And it feels like being together since lifetimes for me with you. I'm Verena. I live in Austria and I'm an astrologer. And I would say my home base in astrology is evolutionary astrology. Mm-hmm. But I also, the more or the longer I am an astrologer, the more intuitive I get. And I started to work with the Akashic Records too. So I would say I'm an astrologer, an intuitive, a channel in a way, a translator in a way of things that I'm being told to share here. Mm-hmm. And I'm also very happy to be here now. And thank you, Jonathan, for letting me speak again in your beautiful podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's always such a pleasure. I should mention too, I would say, I don't really hold these labels with a lot of seriousness, honestly, but I think if I have to label it, probably my practice is more grounded in Hellenistic. But that being said, I've also been, essentially educating myself or being in, like evolutionary astrology containers, or at least containers that are really, rooted in evolutionary astrology practices for as long as I've been studying the more Hellenistic stuff too. So yeah, I would say I'm fluid. I'm a fluid astrologer at this point.
I would say I'm an astrologer in evolution.
Yes. So. I love that, Verena. Also, how mercurial for both of us to be traveling the liminal spaces between different lineages and traditions. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, totally. And we both said before we started the recording that it would be important for us before we really talk about Pluto in Aquarius, which is our main topic today, that we maybe share a little bit with both of our audiences our approach to transits in general. Mm-hmm. That is something that is very important for me because I personally consider transits and astrology and planetary movements and so on as a reflection and a mirroring of overarching energies and an overarching flow of evolution. So planets and transits are not doing something they are not the cause of anything, but just indicative. So they show what is happening inside, outside, in our psyche, in our world, and it might be the case that I am using phrases like Pluto in Aquarius is doing blah blah blah, and I don't mean it like that. It's always so it's always so a little bit difficult to say Pluto in Aquarius is reflecting that. So I just wanted to make that really clear at the beginning, that my approach, and for that reason, it's never that they are doing something with us that we are helpless individuals, but it's really a reflection of this overarching energy, and we can interact in different forms. And because it's always an archetypal energy, we can interact with these energies that are reflected by the cosmos in a more destructive or constructive way. And therefore, astrology is such a source of wisdom, because then we know how we can actually more step into the constructive interaction and become aware of maybe some more shadowy qualities.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah. I also want to add, I agree with everything you're saying, Verena. And I will also say, because of the topic of our conversation today, which is Pluto in Aquarius, there will be examples that I'm sharing that are like more mundane example. But I do want to be clear that I'm not really a mundane astrologer. And so the way I see it is that, you know, astrology, and maybe transits more particularly, is holistic, right? On a personal and collective level, I believe that our external circumstances are really informed by our consciousness, and also that our consciousness is informed by external circumstances. And so I think of how the external and the internal playing out as like a loop a little bit. Like I think of it as represented, by the Ouroboros, right? Like kind of a serpent eating its own tail, rather than monodirectional. Because I think it's easy when we're hearing more mundane examples to either feel afraid of the things that are going to happen to us, right? Or to feel like the sense of like, oh, I have to do something from internally to change the external. And I think, I really want to be very clear that like, this is not really for me so much a prediction as like a contemplation. I think that's something that I've been emphasizing a lot in my work too, where these examples for me are really coming forth as points of contemplation and points of reflection. And I think what's more interesting is in that process of like inquiry, or asking a question and then contemplating on the question, and then to see what comes up from the contemplation, rather than trying to necessarily predict in a more traditional sense what's going to happen with this transit.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for saying that. I'm completely with you. And I really like that you are saying that it's more like circular. And for me, it's like it's all at the same time here. So it's not really that there is this cause and effect thing.
Yeah.
So it's the planetary energy, the planets reflect something that is in me, and that reflects something that is outside. And I can decide on where I'm gonna start to change something. So, and the most powerful approach, in my point of view, is to start to change within myself, because I have the most power over myself than over my environment. But the whole conversation here is not to predict anything. It's more to playfully invite you to start asking and to start exploring, than to give you any answers.
I love it. Very mercurial. Yes.
So we just made some little notes how we gonna move into this Pluto and Aquarius discussion. And I made the we both said that we're gonna start with Pluto and Aquarius as an archetype who will be with us for the next 20 years. I think it's huge. And then when we have discussed the highest potential of this transit, but also maybe some more challenging aspects of Pluto and Aquarius. I would really love to hear what you think and feel when we focus a little bit more on Pluto in Aquarius and Pluto in Capricorn, the stance of Pluto in 2023 in a square to the lunar nodes. But maybe we start the big chapter and then zoom in.
Yeah, I guess to that end, what I would add, Verena, just to kind of ground and situate the listeners, is I'm not really sure when this is going to come out exactly, but essentially, Pluto has been in Capricorn for a long time, 20 some years, right? And then Pluto will be since 2008. Yeah. And so Pluto will be dipping into Aquarius sometime in March 2023, if I'm not mistaken.
I can give you the dates.
Yeah.
Now it's European time, so it might be the case that there is a little time shift, but Pluto will dip into Aquarius on March 23rd. And then it will station retrograde, and then Pluto will go back into Capricorn on June 11th. And then Pluto will again enter Aquarius in January 2024. So it will be a short first, I call it initiation or dip into Aquarius. And I think in 2024, Pluto will go back again into Capricorn and then go into Aquarius. And I think then Pluto will stay in Aquarius for the next 20 years.
Correct. And I think that's a really important point to make, because these outer planets, right, from the perspective of Earth, move very slowly. And so there is always going to kind of be this back and forth action, right? Like we enter or we dip into the vibe of Pluto in Aquarius in March 2023, and then we're going to kind of back off into Capricorn, and then forwards again, and then backwards again, and forwards again. And really we're going to be solidly entering Pluto in Aquarius without a point of return, or is that without any point of return after November 2024. So I think that's kind of worth saying that, even the process of initiating into Pluto in Aquarius, right, is kind of a start and go dance. And I think that already we can feel into the energetics of that a little bit, right? That it is not going to be this, like jump. Like I'm currently, the image that I have in my mind is like, someone jumping into a pool, right? It's not going to be a full immersion. It's going to be like dipping one toe and then out, dipping two toes and then out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to start with the next year or if we want to start first with the whole topic, but I have this feeling that 2023 with this first dip is really like an initiation. So a seed that is planted.
Yeah.
And then over the next 20 years, when Pluto is traveling through the 29 or 30 degrees from 0 to 29 degrees of Aquarius, slowly but surely, we need these 20 years, because Plutonic transformation and transmutation goes so deep. It's about our soul from an evolutionary astrology perspective. So it's good that that personal transits of Pluto takes so long is very good, because we could not. So this deepness of transformation and transmutation needs time. And I think it is really important now. We are here in December 2022, and we are looking into a timeline before us over the next 20 years. And it feels for me really crazy because since I am learning astrology, Pluto is in Capricorn. Pluto is in Capricorn since 2008. So, and for me, it feels huge that Pluto is entering Aquarius. And I feel that on an individual and on a collective level, we must give ourselves time to accumulate and to that this archetypal energies can unfold. And I mean, I personally think that we will feel it in March in some way, because when Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, it was actually in the world very, you noticed it.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually pretty sure that we will notice something in our personal life or in the collective. But I think that it is important to also know that the 0 degree and the last degrees, I think the last degrees of a sign and the first degrees are always so potent. And that there is maybe a certain intensity that then might, I mean, we have 20 years to learn our Pluto and Aquarius lessons in a way.
Yeah. I think you're already providing a really beautiful segue into thinking about Pluto in general, Verena, and then also thinking about Aquarius in general. So yeah, shall we go into that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think, something that I will mention with regards to the Plutonic, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this, but I do feel like when we're thinking about the outer planets, because in traditional astrology, we don't really have a lot of data, we don't have a lot of anecdotes and mythology around it. I think it's really important to both rely on modern astrologers' work, as well as also pay attention to kind of like our own personal gnosis. Like, to me, working with the outer planets, it feels really, really important to use our ability to commune directly, to attune directly with the planets, and to kind of feel into what does this planet feel like, right? Because we don't always have as much history behind it that maybe, like, for example, comparing Pluto to like Jupiter or to Saturn, right, is a very different experience. It's a very different experience to learn about Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus because, we don't have the wisdom, the scholarship of astrologers prior to the discovery of these planets, right? And
we cannot see them.
What was that?
We cannot see them.
Yes, exactly. We cannot see them. Although, I've heard that apparently you can see Uranus during certain moments of Uranus's cycle. You can actually see Uranus in the sky. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely. There is something, I think, in the symbology of like not being able to see them, and also at the same time, I think outer planet experience is very pervasive and it's really kind of felt, right? So, for me, when I began tuning into like the energy of Pluto, the first thing that came up for me in my body was like this experience of kind of like emptying out, of kind of like burning out, which is, in contrast to, for example, when I think about Jupiter and I felt into the energy of Jupiter, I felt an energy of filling up, right? With Saturn, I feel this energy of like calcification, of like kind of grounding down and like really committing to a particular form. For Pluto, the image that is coming up for me is almost like, almost this Buddhist idea of like emptying yourself out of prior, perspectives of knowledge, right? It's like, if you think you knew, the Plutonic journey is going to show you all the places that you didn't know before, right?
Yeah.
How about you, Verena?
Wow, Jonathan, I just love this, how you are feeling the planets, because it resonates so much with my approach to really get in a felt experience with astrology in general. And for me personally, now that you open this topic so beautifully with this feeling that we have with Pluto, for me personally, I completely agree with you. For me, Pluto is purging. For me, Pluto is this image of I have to go very deep and dig in the dirt to really yeah. I have the image now of soil, of really dark soil, and you have to dig deep. You have to maybe take out stuff so that it gets healthy again and that beautiful flowers can grow there. So with Pluto, or this idea of sometimes when I was a child, I sometimes had this high fevers and I was sweating like hell. And after that, you felt like clear and clean in a way. And I think with Pluto, we have these this Pluto is for me the symbol of this constant death and rebirth process that we always in our life and in nature, and that we can see everywhere. This constant idea of something in us, around us, with us has to die so that something new can be born. And because of that, there is a cyclical evolution of death and rebirth, the chrysalis and the butterfly and the caterpillar. And for me, it feels in a way I feel it very deep in my body. And it totally makes sense for me that evolutionary astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green, connects the root chakra with Pluto. So I have this feeling of you have to go deep to clear yourself, to purge, and to even find your light.
Yeah, this idea of like going deep in order to purge and to find light, I think is really powerful, because I also think about the idea of the underworld with Pluto, right? A lot of mythology of Pluto, of Hades, is related to the underworld. And so, one feature I think that's fascinating to contemplate about the underworld is this idea of anonymity. How, all the things that we've accrued in the above world, status, wealth, social standing, is no longer helpful to us in the underworld sometimes. Often when we see depictions of the underworld, they're just kind of, we see depictions of bodies, right? Of just like bodies with this immutable force kind of moving in certain directions rather than individuals, and I think also when I think about Pluto, I think about the idea of loss. And, with regards to transformation, I think it's also worth noting that the kind of plutonic transformation is one that's, it's kind of like a one-track process, right? It's like, it's immutable and it's irreversible, right? We can kind of think about this maybe grounding it in the mythology of like Orpheus and Eurydice, right? That this idea of like, you have lost your lover to the underworld, and even if you try to get this person back, you're either gonna fail or you're gonna do something stupid to like basically mess it up, right? Or Persephone and Demeter, that once Persephone was either abducted or had gone into the underworld, the initial union that Persephone had with Demeter is no longer available, right? Also, I think in the Plutonic, you can even think about the archetype of Persephone herself, that once Persephone went down into the underworld, there is now this divide of like Persephone, the daughter in the above world, versus Persephone, the queen of the underworld, right? So I think with Plutonic themes, there is, to kind of go back to what you were saying about how Plutonic transformation kind of happens over time and happens slowly. I would also add that like with the slowness of that transformation, there's also a totality of the transformation, right? It changed you completely. And there's the sense that like you can't really go back to wherever you came from. Mm-hmm.
I love that, Jonathan. And I would even add something first. Persephone, we all had these experiences that we had to go to in the underworld. And afterwards, we are no longer the person that we are before. Mm-hmm. So Persephone is no longer Kore. So before she goes into the underworld, her name is Kore, and that even means girl. That is no real name. And then she goes into the underworld, and then she gets her name.
Yes.
And then she becomes Persephone. And even though she might go back, she goes back to her mother. Mm-hmm. She's now not the Kore that she was before. And I think that I'm not 100% sure, but I think that Jeffrey Wolf Green says that Pluto is not only transformation, but transmutation. Mm. And the difference is when you transform, you just change the form. But transmutation means that like the caterpillar and the chrysalis, that your complete cell material, everything that you are, get completely meshed, becomes nothing, and something completely new is reborn. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so much this Plutonic way of transformation, or even transmutation, where you really transmute into a new self. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens every day in a way, that happens over time. It happens over life cycles. Pluto as our soul that has many incarnations in a way. Pluto as the desire to reincarnate, to in a way expand and be rebirthed again and again, to gain quote-unquote power, but for me it's more to gain more wisdom in a way. Mm-hmm. I think that this image of the underworld is very important with Pluto, and I think it's part of life, so it's part of the world to have an underworld, and it's nothing that we have to be afraid of, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's also reminding me, Verena, of I would like to caution listeners too around this idea of too quickly merging planetary forces with just one mythology, right? Because even when we think about Pluto as connected to the underworld, the overlap is not just with Hades and Persephone, which is one version of the story of the underworld, but also maybe with Dionysus, or even with like Jesus, right? Because Dionysus and Jesus also had connections to the underworld, and Dionysus is essentially this deity of excess, right? Of fermentation too, so there's a sense of like creating wine or creating mead or creating beer through fermentation is something that is also like an underworld process, right? I think what you were saying about transmutation is deeply connected to alchemy. And you can also think about this in terms of like the Jesus mythology of like going down into the underworld for 3 days and then emerging victorious, right? There is, I think, all of these different relationships that we can have with the underworld that is not just encapsulated by one myth and one myth alone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, we have even within the Venus cycle, the Inanna story with the death of Inanna and the rebirth. Right. And I think that one thing is very important, and maybe we can go afterwards to Pluto in Aquarius, what that means.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think that one important thing is that we die to be rebirthed. So death as not we live and then we die, but we die so that something new can be birthed.
Yeah.
I think that is really, because that brings more, I think we as human beings that have just a very limited capacity to understand life are always have this limited view often, that we think, okay, we live and then we die and then everything is dark and everything, we are at the end, and that feels very scary. But I think Pluto really invites us to see the life cycles from the perspective of our soul. And because of that, even these underworld journeys that we might have, not always, but which maybe come with Pluto, are just part of a larger cycle.
I love that.
Are actually serving our life journey.
I really love that. Yeah. I think it's interesting because sometimes when you read modern astrologers, they like to talk about Pluto as this idea of where we fall in the scale or the spectrum of empowerment and disempowerment. And I think it's interesting to bring in what you just said, Verena, because I think it's very empowering to start interacting with death, both literal and metaphorical, as a portal, right? Death as a tool that we can use in order to transmute or to transform or to have the rebirth experience. Like, what does it look like to know that death is intimately connected to life, right? Yeah. I also once had this meditation, also with Pluto, where what I heard was that living is dying. And I think there's kind of something very profound around that, where, you know, if you think of the human life, at least, you know, life as we understand it, as this finite, you know, I was born and then I died at the age of 86 or whatever, right? Age that you ended up dying. If you look at your life as like this ruler, the more you live, the closer you get to death, you know? And so I think
so
there's...
Saturnian.
Yeah, I know. So Saturnian, and I can kind of feel, you know, Capricorn, Aquarius starting to kind of come in here. But yeah, this idea of really meditating, you know, meditating on life as connected intimately with death and death intimately connected with life, that they are really part of a cycle rather than, as you said, the ending. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I also, I see Pluto very much connected to these topics around power too, and this disempowerment and power. And I think I don't want to go too deep into that, because I think we should focus now on Pluto and Aquarius. But just to mention that there's power and disempowerment and self-empowerment, I think Pluto can teach us, or Pluto reflects that there are lessons for us as human beings and as souls that incarnated on planet Earth to learn around the difference between stepping into this power that is really self-empowerment, that comes from the heart and wants to empower others too, and giving away our power or overpower others. So there is definitely something to learn with Pluto. But I think that I think that it is a gateway to Pluto and Aquarius, even when we feel in a way disempowered. Sometimes I have the feeling, and I hope that it is okay that I'm saying that, I sometimes have the feeling sometimes we must feel disempowered so that we have the urge to step into our power and to reclaim our power.
Yeah.
And that can happen over big cycles in our life. Even I'm aware of past lives where I was powerlessness, and I'm aware of past lives where I was the persecutor.
Oppressor. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that it's all about really reclaiming this very soul-based power in a good way. And yeah, I'm really excited now with Pluto entering Aquarius, because I ask myself, because I'm always very much my approach to astrology and to transits is really, I'm 100% sure that everything happens for our soul's evolution, for the evolution of every individual and the collective. I'm really I feel that, and when I tap into my Akashic records, I feel that this universe is friendly. It's very Aquarian approach, by the way, to say that it is friendly, that we live in a friendly world, even though it might look different. And I am very sure when I receive the messages from my spirit guides, from my Akashic records guides, that not many beings in this universe are trying to support planet Earth, that we can make it here. You know?
Yeah,
and
I love that.
I asked myself, what would be the highest potential of Pluto in Aquarius? And I did a note about that just before we met. And I think I will read it, and I would be super interested in what you think and what you feel.
Sure.
So I have written down, the highest potential with Pluto in Aquarius is that we rebirth ourselves as the authentic soul that we are before we experienced any limiting conditionings. The highest potential of Pluto in Aquarius is that everyone comes back to their natural soul frequency, lives according to their soul's essence, and therefore serves the collective with their individual gifts. The highest potential is that we rebirth ourselves and the world and liberate from repressive and distorted systems. But to rebirth ourselves and the world means that something must die.
I love that. I love that. That actually reminds me, Verena, of something you said to me recently, which I have just been holding near and dear to my heart, which is this idea that harmony is really achieved when everyone is playing their part and everyone is emanating the frequency that they're supposed to based on their soul template. I think that's really beautiful. And as a musician, I always use this example that you don't ever want to listen to an orchestra where everybody's playing the same note, or everybody, all the instruments have the same timbre, because it's actually just kind of awful and not just boring. I would say it's kind of an assault on the senses, right? That beauty really comes through when we allow this level of diversity. But maybe I am encroaching the realm of Libra a little bit here. But I really love what you were saying about rebirthing ourselves as the authentic version. And I think what is really interesting to think about with Pluto in Aquarius is perhaps, what are some of the possible ways, on a more micro level that can happen? So what I really mean by that is, I will kind of bring in my contemplation here around the idea of, when I think about Aquarius, right? Aquarius is a fixed air sign. And it's interesting because the sign that came before Aquarius is Capricorn, as we've discussed. And in traditional astrology, both Capricorn and Aquarius are ruled by Saturn. So you kind of feel this level of resonance. There is something about Capricorn and Aquarius that are connected to one another, in some ways, maybe more from like an, evolutionary astrology perspective or modern astrology perspective that thinks about the modern rulership of Aquarius, as Uranus, and then the whole Saturn unification doesn't really work anymore, we can also kind of think about Capricorn and Saturn, or Capricorn and Aquarius, as the two signs that are opposite the luminaries, right? So even if we don't use traditional rulership, we can kind of think about how, Capricorn and Aquarius are both the signs that are furthest away, in a way, from the luminaries, And it makes me think about this idea of structure, and again, structure is a word that we use for Capricorn, but for Aquarius, I think about more of the airy structures, right? The unspoken social rules rather than the codified laws, right? The air element, is interesting because it always makes me think about how we are breathing oxygen and we don't quite understand the quality of the air that we consistently breathe, right, on a daily basis until we get out of that place. Recently I had the chance of traveling to see my family again halfway across the world for the first time since the pandemic. And it is wild, Verena, to experience how being in a different culture can make the process of repatriating or like coming back to like where I'm currently living as being this really jarring experience. So you're suddenly hyper aware of people's facial expressions, people's tone of voice, what is considered rude and not considered rude, being so different than other places, right? So culture is so ingrained in us, and it's not, even though we don't have laws around culture, those social laws and these social interactions are so prevalent, and in some sense, they both create a container and they can also serve as our imprisonment, right? I would like to pause there and kind of hear, if you have anything to add to that or respond to that.
I love what you said, Jonathan, and I think it's very good, and I really felt drawn to talk with you about Pluto and Aquarius because I know that you have roots in Hellenistic astrology as well. So where you have this rulership, because for me, because I'm not so much into Hellenistic astrology, for me the ruler is Uranus, and I can understand the Hellenistic, so I'm not close to that. I understand the Hellenistic perspective and these two sides of Saturn, the yin and the yang side of Saturn, and the air and the earth. But for me, it feels very much like this in Capricorn, and I think we felt that so strongly. It's about our conditionings. And because we live in a hierarchical system since centuries, we connect Capricorn often with patriarchal hierarchical system. But that's not original Capricorn. Maybe we can talk about that later when we talk about the upcoming year. But I think we become, Capricorn is about these conditionings that we take over from our surrounding, over lifetimes, from our parents, from society, and so on. And then in Aquarius, and I think that's so interesting, in Aquarius, with Uranus, Aquarius, air. So we become objective. We can step away and look at ourselves, look at our life, look at our conditioning, and therefore we can liberate ourselves. So it's really about this, a little bit, there is some coolness around Aquarius because of this objectivity and of this intellectual view that allows us to liberate and to come back to something that is more natural to our soul. And I mean, I have in my natal chart Saturn in a balsamic conjunction to Uranus. So I really have it in my chart, this Saturn-Uranus meeting or coming together. And I think it's not, even Aquarius, I totally see that like you. It's not about having no structures. I think it's about having living according to our authentic ways. And I think as a soul that incarnated on planet Earth in a body, we cannot have no structures. So our body is a structure. Our body is a vessel. We live here in a time-space continuum. And in Aquarius, we experience ourselves as beings that can zoom out, that can leave time and space.
Yeah.
And I think here is it's a gift, and at the same time the disease in a way. So it's the beautiful gift of Aquarius, and I see that so much connected with Pluto and Aquarius too, that we maybe on a very personal level experience in the upcoming years, that we say, okay, I played these rules. I played these roles. I followed these rules. I had these structures in my life. I thought I have to be this or that. And I become more and more aware that my soul's authentic, my soul's authenticity and what I came here for, when I don't listen to voices outside or internalized voices, I feel that more and more, and I can see it because I step away from the idea that I have to fulfill expectations of society, of external authority figures. And I think on an individual level, Pluto and Aquarius can have this high potential that we allow ourselves more and more to come back to our soul's isness, to the natural essence of our soul. And therefore, from the individual on, we can create new structures, quote unquote, within new networks. I think for me, the Aquarius structures is more the network structure, so that we allow ourselves and therefore others too to become more and more our unique essence. And allow ourselves to change, because that is really important. I think that because when we say, okay, now I know who I am, I'm not any longer this or that. Now I know who I am. We have to be very careful that we don't even crystallize this being that we feel at this moment, so that we allow ourselves to change on and on. And I think with Pluto and Aquarius, it's really about, okay, what has to die? This part of me that thinks it has to follow certain rules that are unnatural for me, that part of me has to die, so that I can come back to my authentic soul's isness and allow myself to live more and more accordingly to that, and therefore do what I'm here for and serve the planet.
I love that, Verena. It makes me think about, I wasn't really gonna talk about this, but what you were saying reminds me of like the sequence between Capricorn and then Aquarius and then Pisces, right? Because there was a piece there that you mentioned around crystallizing, and I think this is really important to remember for the Aquarian part of us, right? That yes, once we find a new structure that we feel reflects who we are in this moment, there can be a tendency to then want to crystallize again until we learn the Piscean lesson, right? And I do think this is fascinating because I'm a Pisces sun and I am surrounded by Aquarius suns in my life. Like, my partner is an Aquarius sun. I have a lot of Aquarius sun friends. And I always like to lovingly and compassionately joke with them about how Aquarius always likes to think about how, Aquarius likes to consider themselves to be really avant-garde and to be really out there and to be really revolutionary. And I think there's some truth to that, but I think the real revolutionary is Pisces, actually, because the Pisces in us already is kind of like moving from that place of like the inner child and the inner elder at the same time. The Pisces part of us is walking in a dream, and within that dream, there are no rules. You know, the Pisces parts of us presupposes that there are already no rules, whereas I think the Aquarius part of us is breaking away from that rule, right? I think if you think about the modern rulership of Aquarius as being ruled by Uranus, something that the astrologer Rick Tarnas had pointed out in his book Cosmos and Psyche is that Uranus mythology, or Uranus as a planet, is much more tied to the mythology of Prometheus than Uranus, right? And in the mythology of Prometheus, there is this push and pull between the existing power structure and the emergent power structure. And I think what is really important to remember as we are moving into this Aquarian process is that, the answer is that there are no rules, right? The answer is Pisces, ultimately. Ultimately, the Aquarian part of us really wants to kind of move into the Piscean realm of already living the dream, already living the ideal. And it's still kind of in this process of navigating what does it mean to move from the Capricornian place of structure and rigidity into the Piscean place of, realizing that you make the structure, right? You create the rules. And if you are aware that you have this divinity within you that can dictate the rules, you can change the rules at any time, and that you don't have to be beholden to any rules, including the ones you create for yourself.
Yeah, and these are the most strict rules that we create for ourselves.
Exactly.
I actually love what you say, and I would love to reflect something that came up for me. And interesting side note, Saturn will move into Pisces when Pluto will move into Aquarius.
Yes.
So that's as a little side note. So we have exactly these three archetypes: the Saturn Capricorn archetype, the Aquarius archetype, and the Pisces archetype. We all will feel that, live that in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that as you were talking about Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, for me, it feels very much like, and even when we see it in the natural zodiac, when we start with Aries, so these are the last 3 signs. So we wrap the cycle up in a way. And I have the feeling that in Aquarius, or I can feel that in a way, that there is this a little bit of a split, because in Aquarius we experience ourselves as a frequency, a soul frequency. We can zoom out with our higher consciousness. It's so much about our higher self, our higher consciousness. I even feel the Akashic records very much as an Uranian, Aquarian energy. So really we have this capacity as human beings, or as souls who incarnated on Earth, to zoom out, to leave our body, to leave time and space, to go into the Akashic fields, to go into outer space with our higher mind. And Aquarius is, as my teacher Ari Moji-Wolf always says, is the divine intelligence of the cosmos. That's Aquarius. But at the same time, I think in Aquarius, we must see, or we should not forget, that we are still human beings. And I think there is something, there is a certain split within the Aquarius archetype, because this idea that we are more than our body and than our Saturnian, Capricornian matter and reality it starts in Aquarius, and then in Pisces we understand that even matter is part of the all that is. That everything is everything, so that everything is divine and everything is light. But I think in Aquarius we have this clash between, and maybe I say that because at the moment we still have Uranus in Taurus, so we have this yeah, now I got all of these insights and I zoomed out and I have been in the Akashic fields, and how can I bring it to Earth?
Yeah.
And I think that will be the challenge, especially on a collective level, or maybe too on an individual level, because I think that all of these wisdoms that we gain, all of these liberation and all of this freedom of our mind, our soul decided to incarnate on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of our Pluto and Aquarius experience, I think, to bring that power back to Earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you're saying makes me think about the experience that I think we've been having in the past year, specifically around resurgence of more animistic beliefs, Verena, or like animist spirituality, because I do think that it's also very much a foreshadowing to this Pluto and Aquarius energy. And in fact, you can even think about it, I love that you were bringing up this idea of the Pluto Aquarius transit in March 2023 will coincide with Saturn entering into Pisces. So I think we can kind of see that there is, at this moment at least, there is this relationship where Saturn is kind of teaching Pluto almost kind of like, hey, this is what's going to come up, because the Aquarius energy is already present with Saturn in the past year, and I think I like to correlate this with the idea of animist spirituality, because I think animist spirituality really helps us understand that there is spirit to everything, including that which we, in the modern lexicon of our times, consider as inanimate objects. Like, for example, the internet, right? We like to think that the internet is this like dead thing, when in reality, there's also a spirit to the internet, right? There's also soul to the internet, and how we work with this spirit of the internet is actually much more up to us than we like to think it is. So something I want to point out, just kind of as an example that came up for me when I'm thinking about Pluto and Aquarius, is, our internet etiquette, right? Like how we treat each other when we interact through the internet. How we comment on each other's thoughts and ideas and presence, right? A few years ago, this idea of being canceled on the internet was really present. And I think it's really fascinating to see, as Saturn entered Aquarius, how there's a lot of conversation towards the opposite direction, right? Towards the idea of like, hey, remember when you are canceling someone on the internet for something that they wrote 15 years ago? The person you're canceling is a human. Remember the humanity behind this person, right? And then also this idea of selection, I think, is really important to talk about, because I notice a lot of conversations around the algorithm and how, I hate being on social media because the algorithm shows me what I need to see. And I feel really, with compassion, I want to point out that what you see via the algorithm is a reflection of your behavior, And so I think these are very Aquarian themes that are coming up. And I think with Pluto entering Aquarius, when I felt into it, the energy is around really remembering our agency, and our participation with regards to what we ended up consuming, right? And similarly, also, I think this idea of the avatar, recently, while we're recording this, there's a new trend of inputting your personal photo into an app called, I believe, Lensa is probably the most popular. And then it will spit back out this artificial intelligence generated art, right? To kind of give you your avatar. And I think this idea of the avatar, this idea of how we present ourselves to the world, it's really interesting to kind of track the energetics of Pluto and Aquarius through the avatar. Because I think we are in a moment now, as a collective where the divide is starting to be normalized, right? The divide of ourselves as, human beings, like who have feet, who are rooted to wherever we are currently situated on Earth, is separate than who we are on the internet. And that there's no shame around this, right? That in fact, this illusion that social media has to represent quote unquote reality is starting to shatter as we become, more practiced in the game of Leo and Aquarius, right? Of presenting ourselves publicly through our teeny tiny little devices, right? We start to realize that this persona of who we are behind closed doors when nobody else is watching, who we are when we're with our closest friends, and who we are when we are seen in the public square is tale that's as old as time. Right? Like this idea of the avatar is not new. We like to think it's new, but in fact, it's only new because we are working with this idea or this concept of the avatar in a new channel, in a new format, right? The Instagram may be a new app, but this idea of the divide that we create between ourselves behind closed doors and in public squares is really ancient, and in fact, maybe there is potential for collaboration between emergent technology and who we are and who we've always been as humans. And in the process of that collaboration, in that process of the marriage of our analog self and our digital self, maybe there's something new that will emerge. Right? There's a new way of being. And hopefully, as you said, Verena, there is more of an awareness of what is our natural soul frequency.
Yeah. Wow, that was amazing, Jonathan. And I want to add that I think you brought up with the avatar, the Leo polarity.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we start a new Venus cycle in Leo in 2023 when Pluto will have these back and forth into Aquarius. Venus will start her new cycle, which is 18 months. This, I think, July or August in Leo. Mm-hmm. So I think Venus in Leo is so much connected to our heart. And really to Leo is fire. It's our heart. It is our animal body too. Mm-hmm. So I think that it can help us to ground more into our heart's frequency. So that we don't zoom out too much. And what you said about all of these things with the internet and our avatar and social these algorithms and so on. Jonathan, and I really don't want to scare anybody, but I have the feeling that when Pluto travels through Aquarius, at the moment how I feel it, there are certain figures or groups who have the quote-unquote power within social networks, all of these apps, who creates the algorithms and so on. And when Pluto moves into Aquarius, I don't think that the whole internet will collapse or something like that. Never. But I think that we will have there will be happen something. And I think that it comes to a decentralization. And I can even, what I can imagine is that many people say no because they go too far. These powerful people within these social networks go too far, so that you are shadow banned, etc., and so on. That it gets so intense that many people say, okay, no, I don't want that. I create new ways to socially interact and maybe have alternative concepts, how we can connect around the world via networks without being so dependent on these the internet is it's a very old, how it is structured is very old. It feels very Capricornian for me. It feels very the old way, hierarchical, patriarchal, not Capricornian, because the original Capricorn is not patriarchal, but it feels patriarchal. It feels there are certain parties who have the power and they dictate how the algorithm is, how much you have to pay for an advert post, and when you don't pay as the owner of a business account, then nobody will see your post, and so on. And I think there is something there. Maybe there will be some change around that. Maybe there will come back the power to the individual and to decentralize this whole thing so that it really serves its original the original idea is that we can connect, that we can share, that it does not matter in which area and in which time zone. So we are out of time and space in a way within these social networks, with Zoom, with Instagram, with Facebook, and so on. And we can connect, we can share. We can share our gifts with the world in a way. And we are already doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the ways or how it is structured, there can be something that can be better and that can be developed and evolved.
I agree. I also see that perhaps a similar pattern will also emerge in the IRL world. You know, there is the URL, which we've kind of talked about at great length, but I think also in real life, there may be more attempts around people organizing and trying to create their own social reality, whether that's, I don't know, like creating a commune, or maybe even creating a new country. I think that may be a theme that we kind of see throughout this period. And again, as you mentioned, Verena, this is a very long transit. So there's a lot of space for experimentation and for like new ways of behaving to emerge. And, something I will say that I think is interesting from one of my teachers, Leah Garza, this was, and this is something that she communicated or she shared about when the abortion laws, Roe v. Wade, was overturned in the US. It was, just to paraphrase it, it was this question of like, why do we let governments determine what we do to our bodies? Where is the inherent disempowerment that we feel, right? The inability that we feel to govern ourselves and our own body, to be able to cede that authority to a government, or the legislatures, right? I think Pluto in Aquarius can really show us where we feel unconsciously not equipped within our own personal and relational autonomy to handle things that should actually be governed by ourselves as individuals, I have a really silly example around this, which is, nobody ever, or as far as I'm aware, there are no laws in the United States around farting. Right. And I'm talking about the release of like bodily gas. And that's because, social norms and rules around farting is so prevalent. Right. So it's very clear to us, like, where is it appropriate to fart and where is it not appropriate to fart? Right. And there are all of these unwritten social norms around it that are strong enough so that we don't feel the need to codify certain laws in order to understand what's responsible and not responsible. And I think this theme, I don't mean that necessarily there's going to be an overhaul of how the laws work necessarily. I mean, maybe no, right? But I do think these questions are going to be really present for a lot of us. And also this idea of like, what are human rights? What does it mean to be human, right? What are rights? are we machines? I think like these questions are really going to come up, and we're going to really have to grapple with them. We're going to have to play with them in a way that we have been playing with questions around authority and existing structures when Pluto was in Capricorn.
Yeah. Completely, Jonathan. And I also want to mention that I think when we do really our Capricorn work in a good way, so when we step into our self-authority and we learn to act self-responsible, and when we learn to act in integrity, we don't need authorities outside who say what we have to do. So it's really when we actually do our Capricorn job in a good way, we can be free in Aquarius, because then we don't need restrictive rules or people who say what we have to do, because we are self-responsible, we are matured, and then we can. So Capricorn is really the preparation for Aquarius. And I think that we can just have freedom on a bigger scale when every soul is doing their inner work and is acting self-responsible and responsible and in alignment with integrity. Because we had the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was during the French Revolution. So they wanted freedom, but the people have not been the inner evolution was not they have not yet learned to behave responsible when there are no governments and kings and queens that tell them what to do or what not to do, like a little child. So I really hope that we are now, 250 years later, on an individual and on a collective level, and we have 20 years time for that, matured enough so that we can actually slowly but surely have more freedom and more levels of freedom and less restrictive rules on an individual and on a collective level, because I think that is the overarching topic that I feel so much, that we come from centuries and lifetimes of systems that have been distorted, that have been oppressive in a way, and that we are, and I think that our generation who is living now and who is listening to the podcast and watching this video, I am not sure if we, in this lifetime, will really live in this new world, quote unquote. But we have incarnated because our soul wants to co-create it. And we are in this in-between phase where, and I feel that so strongly emphasized now in the upcoming year, it's really like it's focusing, this topic is focusing in the next year, because we have Pluto and Capricorn. The old systems, we know what is no longer working. The tower is falling down, it's broken. But the new is not yet to come. So with Pluto and Aquarius dipping into Aquarius in 2023, there are maybe first vision seeds on an individual and on a collective level. What might be the new way? What might be a more authentic and free way to live and to work and to live together and to build communities and to build relationships? But it's not yet here. So it's really about this huge shift, which will go over decades on a collective level. I think on an individual level, it can be so much quicker, where we, let go of what is no longer working and find these new visions. And what that might be and how that might unfold, I don't know. I'm really excited about that. I feel very strongly, me personally as Verena, I feel very strongly that I am in this destructive deconditioning process, and that there is something there once come something that feels more expansive, more free, more natural.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the overarching theme of the next year and the years to come. Yeah, I stop here.
I love that. I also think that, you know, it's a good time as we are shifting out of Pluto and Capricorn, and as we mentioned earlier, like dipping in and out of Pluto and Aquarius to really, I think, center into what I feel is one of the most helpful or most radiant manifestation of the Capricorn energy, which is the idea of like studying structures and studying history in order to like uncover the heart of history. Because I think there's one way of approaching the Capricornian where we can be on a very mental level, analyzing all the ways that the structure has gone wrong. But I think part of this liminal space we're in, transitioning from Capricorn to Aquarius, also has a lot to do with, trying to recover what is at the heart of the creation of those structures in the first place. And then not maybe feeling pressure to recreate it, but to understand that in order to truly innovate, right, you must understand the rules. You must understand what came before it. I do think that this is very important. And I think that it's powerful to not just leave structures, but to understand while leaving, what was it about the energetics of that structure that have become cancerous, right? And to be really aware not to replicate it when you create a new structure, because it's easy for us in this human form with our logical mind to think that, okay, I'm just going to create a new structure and then it's going to be problem is completely solved, right? Like I don't have to worry about it anymore. But the reality is, I think, bringing in this idea maybe again of how Pisces can teach Aquarius is that the energetics is actually what always informs the structure. And even if you have the most perfect structure without being attuned to the energetics, it's kind of a dangerous endeavor, to think that structures can save you.
I like that. And I like that Pisces has this natural sextile to Capricorn.
Yes.
And I have this feeling of, and that is always what I preach when I talk about Capricorn and the original Capricorn, that Capricorn is this very flexible, loving structure that actually grows with you and that can adapt and that can give your soul and your Pisces flow a little grounding in a loving way. And when you were talking about structures and that it might be important to study the reason for structures or even what went wrong, and so that we don't recreate it, the image I had the image of plants actually that are structures. So like leaves, natural structures. What is a natural structure? Everywhere where we are going in nature are structures. Everything in nature is structured. But these structures are part of a living system. And they grow and they unfold.
Yeah.
So how can we, and this is an open question, how can we on an individual level, and I ask that myself too in my life, how can we create structures that are natural, that grow with us, that allow us to unfold, that are giving us a certain kind of feeling of being whole without being restricted.
Yeah.
And I think that is in a way very Aquarian and very Pluto in Aquarius, that we say, okay, everything must die that is not in alignment with our soul's essence with the intelligence of the cosmos, and how can we recreate our world in a way that every soul can live according to their nature and to their natural essence.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Jonathan, I think you have to wrap it up slowly but surely.
Yeah. Are there any other points that you would like to make, or something that you kind of would love to leave the listeners with?
Yes, one thing is very important, I think, really important. All of these changes that we are in, and I think I have the feeling, and what I'm being told, 2022 and the last years were just the preparation. So it's when Pluto moves into Aquarius, I think there will be many, many, many shifts. And what I'm being told by my guides is that it becomes increasingly important to learn to regulate our nervous system.
Wow.
Because our human body is not used to these changes, and everything, even though our higher self and even though our mind and our consciousness says, okay, yes, I want this change, or I want to let go of this or that, or I want to try this new way of living, our animal body feels that everything that is new is dangerous, and therefore we are in a trauma reaction. And when we are in a panic and trauma reaction, and I think many of us, and I think that is a huge topic of Pluto and Aquarius too, that maybe many of us, that is something that I really recognize. I recognize now that I am, since I'm alive, acting I'm many often in a state of panic and stress from past lives. Mm-hmm. So I think that can be a huge point of where healing can come up, because when I look in our world and in our society, I have the feeling that here are many, many people who are acting from a state of trauma and panic that they have from their past and their past lives. And that it is of huge importance that we become aware of that, and that we learn to really work with our body, calm down our nervous system, because just when we are acting from a place of peace, we can really make decisions that are in alignment. Because when I am in this breathlessness, Aquarius is related to the lungs, in this breathlessness, I cannot decide what is right or wrong for me. So I think because there are so many changes that will happen, it's really important to regulate our nervous system, come into our body, become aware of maybe where we act from a state of panic, maybe go into healing with that. Ask for support by professionals to heal these trauma. And it must not be from that lifetime. So Aquarius is related to our long-term memory that can store memories from past lives. And there can be so much healing around that, I think, with Pluto and Aquarius. Yeah.
I also have heard once, a somatic practitioner saying something along the lines of, the person who gets to win in the room is the person with the strongest nervous system. So, really that goes both ways, right? If you are a calming, grounding presence, you probably are able to absorb the shock of the others, who are in the room with their own agenda, with their own trauma running the show. And similarly, if you are the person who's the most dysregulated, you can also be creating that wave, sending that wave through the room. Yeah, that's an excellent point, Verena. I think what I would add to, with regards to any sort of transits, but specifically thinking about longer transits such as Pluto and Aquarius, is that it can be easy for us, and I think this is really a normal, natural response, to feel like when we're listening to information about transit, that there's something that we need to do, that we need to somehow fix something. But I think it's really important for me at least, to remind myself to continue to just ground myself and to have the experience I'm having currently, to really live in the present moment, because thinking ahead or really feeling into the energy of the cosmic guidance, I think is powerful, and I think is really important. And also, a reminder to not let that take us away from our current embodied experience, to really live like day by day, hour by hour, right? Moment by moment, and to kind of continue to come back to the present moment, because in coming back to the present moment, we are able to maintain, I think, a superpower, which is that we can respond from a place of our current truth and a place of truly seeing the situation for what it is, or how it appears to us in this moment, rather than being run by our past programming, by our trauma, or any other thing. For people who are pretty sensitive, you may also consistently be run by other people's energies and other people's agenda. So I think, this can seem like, I don't know, maybe this is advice that's good for any transit, not just Pluto and Aquarius. But I think, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying about nervous system, cultivating a deeper relationship with one's nervous system, I think part of that is also continuing to come back to the present moment and allowing your own senses, as they currently are perceiving information, to be guiding the show rather than your own mental narratives, because that's what we've been taught all our lives, to run the script from our mental process. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, to ground what I was just very spontaneously adding and putting on the table.
I love that.
because that what you just said is exactly what for me feels like nervous system regulation, to really come into the moment and feel what is there, and give yourself time to, I think what my intent with that, or why I said that, is that I think that it might be important to not forget to have self-compassion with our human being, with our animal body, even though we may be on a spiritual or on a conscious level, can go these next steps and are curious and curious, but that we really, that it might be important to, as you said, come back in the moment and take your body with you in all of these developments. Because for our body, and it's interesting, I talked about that with my physiotherapist, because I had some back issues, and I went to him, and he said that, and we talked about that the human system, so really our nervous system and our human body, is actually not used to all of these information that are coming in constantly. We have the internet and all of this media since the 1980s or so, and our human body is it's not made for that.
Yeah.
So evolution happens over such a long time. So the evolution of our biological evolution happens over thousands of years. And our animal body is not yet attuned to all of that. So it's very natural that many of us feel overwhelmed. And
Absolutely.
I think that is something that we should not forget. Yeah.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. Thank you, Verena.
Thank you, Jonathan. How do you feel? I feel that we covered the topic very well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's lots of juicy stuff for people to contemplate here.
And it was so nice to flow very freely with you through the cosmos.
As always.
And I would love, maybe you want to share how people can find you, can connect with you, and what are your current offerings.
Sure.
So I'm not sure when we will, both of us will put it out, but I think somewhere in winter, 2022, 2023. So
Yeah. Thanks for that. I would say nowadays my most favorite way of showing up is through my podcast. It's called Healing the Spirit. Maybe you're listening to this at the moment. I do weekly contemplations. So at the beginning of the week, either on Monday or Tuesday, I share a little bit about the energy of the week and, any points for contemplation, any points of inspiration that I would like to share with everyone. Folks can book a reading with me, find me through my website. Currently, it's still www.natechimusic.com. It's actually, it's a remnant of my music project. And maybe that will change soon. I'm not really sure. Folks can also find me on Instagram. If you just type out my name, I think I will pretty much show up. So those are all the ways to find me, and I am also available for readings. So if anyone is interested in working one-on-one, I am really excited to do that. I have some plans to do some, either webinars or cultivate some sort of like learning containers. But at this moment, I'm still focused on my current year-long astrology program that I'm co-facilitating with my collaborator, Britton LaRue, Astrology as Praxis. So I don't think we will open enrollment until maybe like 2024. But feel free to sign up for my newsletter if you would like to stay in touch. Yeah. How about you, Verena?
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And I highly recommend everybody your podcast, your one-on-one readings. It's so wonderful. I love to get a session by you, and it's always so expansive and wonderful.
Thank you. Likewise, you're a great practitioner.
Jonathan, I am the best way to stay in contact with me, especially when you speak English, is actually my newsletter, because my website is still in German. So I definitely will, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, Verena Borell have a new website. No, I plan to do it now, but time is limited. So the best way to stay in contact is my newsletter. There is a newsletter in English language and one in German language. So you can choose whatever you want. And you can follow me on Instagram. But because we don't know what will happen with Instagram, get on my newsletter list. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram in both languages, German and English. And if you speak German, I have some offerings where I teach astrology, my Astro Basics course for people who just want to learn astrology, and my Living Astrology Intense program. It starts in January, so it depends on when you are watching this. Living Astrology Intense is really my signature program, quote unquote. It's a 6-month container, and we really live astrology, we deepen our knowledge, and we start to have an astrological practice and to get to deepen our relationship with the cosmos. And it's a wonderful program. It's a very small group, so with 3 live classes per month, lots of additional material. So if you love and want to learn and live and love astrology, it's perfect. And I have something coming up in English language. So I feel called to teach my first astrology program in English language in 2023, maybe in spring. I'm not yet sure, but it will be around the topics transits and how we can use transits for healing and discover the highest potential of transits. And what I have in my heart and in my mind is a holistic approach that we really bring the transits, the energy of the transits into our body, that we work with creativity as well. So there's something brewing inside of me. And if you're interested, I already have a waiting list for that course, or you can just sign up for my newsletter. And there will be another thing for my German audience, a very surprising offering around Venus. But get on my newsletter list and you will know more. And yes, I do one-on-one sessions too. So I do one-on-one sessions in English language and in German language on the ground of evolutionary astrology. But it's an intuitive approach to evolutionary astrology. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Verena. This has been such a delight.
Jonathan, it was so much fun. So much fun that Pluto can be fun.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I never had so much fun with Pluto, actually.
Yes, this is great. I love co-channeling with you. You are always a fountain of wisdom. So thank you.
Oh, you are such a source of wisdom, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you for listening to this conversation between me and Verena. If you resonate with Verena's voice, I highly recommend that you check out her YouTube channel, her newsletter, and her offerings. All the links will be in the show notes below. And if you've been enjoying Healing the Spirit, I would absolutely love it if you could leave a review, leave some stars in the podcast app that you're listening to. Please leave us 5 stars. If you do not like it enough to leave 5 stars, feel free to just not leave us any stars. That's also a very viable option. But I would really appreciate reviews, because reviews really help this podcast find more people who may benefit from this work, from this conversation. And truly and honestly, the review does not have to be long. I have been telling people that even 2 sentences or 3 sentences are totally sufficient. So you can just say, you totally love this episode and you encourage everybody to listen to it. And that's totally fine. And I will be eternally grateful to you. All right. I can't wait to see you again next time. I hope you take good care of yourself, and I am sending you so much love. Thank you so much.